And indeed, this is quite an exciting session, looking at the commercial service providers and their offering in this microgravity market. So let me start by thanking them for their availability to be part of this session, and just with a very brief intro. So we are in the particular time where we're moving away from what we can call the International Space Station era to the post-ISS era, that we believe will be made of many more commercial players and an offering to reach microgravity and to access microgravity that is quite diverse and open to new businesses in quite a few different markets. So I'm quite happy to be able to moderate this session, and let's really start with a warm-up question, let's say. So I would like to ask each of the panelists to introduce themselves, the company, and very briefly, which is the core offering that they provide in each market. Maybe I'll go in order of appearance. We can start with Sebastian Klaus at ATMOS Space Cargo.
We don't have Sebastian on.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
We have you now, Sebastian. Thank you.
Hi. So I'll have to see how much time you have for me now. I see we have a slight change in the schedule. So let me just introduce very briefly what we're doing at ATMOS. For those of you who don't know me yet, my name is Sebastian. I'm the CEO and one of the 4 co-founders of ATMOS Space Cargo. The company has been in business since 2021. Yeah, my personal background is from both aerospace and from defense. So I served as an officer 14 years in the German Army, but I also studied aerospace engineering, did my bachelor's about atmospheric reentry 15 years ago already, and then my master's at Airbus Defence and Space about reusable spacecraft and propulsion. My 3 co-founders, they all come originally from the space industry. So my deputy, Marta Oliveira, our COO, was a launch safety engineer for the Ariane 5 before she joined us, but she also worked for ESA, NASA, and CNES before. Our CTO, Jeffrey, comes from Airbus Defence and Space. He's been building the large special satellites missions for 18 years total. Our lead systems engineer and 4th co-founder, Chris Grimm, he used to work for the DLR, the German Space Agency, in the Department of Landing and Exploration Technology. So pretty much like the public equivalent of what we are now doing commercially. Got his PhD in aerospace engineering there and then joined us. So together we have grown the company to currently just shy of 60 people in the company. And what we do is we develop free-flying vehicles that enable in-space manufacturing and research and development in low Earth orbit. We flew orbitally for the first time in April of this year, 22nd of April. We intend to fly more. So the second flight is planned for next year, late summer. And then the third flight is going to happen in early 2027. So we are now ramping up the cadence of flying. The vehicle that we built is pretty much built upon the legacy of the International Space Station, right? So we pretty much looked at what is flying on the International Space Station already. We looked at the form factors, like, for example, the ISS mid-deck lockers, but also the smaller CubeSat-sized payloads. And then we looked at what is needed for those types of payloads, right? Like in terms of pressurization, power, temperature, data exchange, interfaces. And then we designed a vehicle around that. So currently, our Phoenix 1 and 2 vehicles are able to carry 100 kilograms of payload. So that's, for example, 3 mid-deck lockers or a combination of smaller payloads. And combination of payloads is an important word here, because you all see that we also have Mathieu here from Space Cargo Unlimited. So we have a very close partnership with SCU. And SCU has a lot of experience in combining these types of payloads. They've been doing that, Mathieu, correct me if I'm wrong, already almost 10 years, with a lot of experience on the International Space Station and with SpaceX and other providers. And so the way that we share the work here is that ATMOS is pretty much the provider of the, let's say, the space container, meaning the re-entry vehicle which can contain those payloads. And Space Cargo Unlimited with the bento box is combining a lot of different payloads into a flight. And so we have a preferred partnership here with SCU to make this happen. And if in certain cases, like for specific requirements of the payload, but also, let's say, if it's, for example, for national security reasons, then ATMOS is also able to fly payloads directly as a direct supplier. Yeah, what else can I tell you about Phoenix? The interesting thing about Phoenix is that it's a very, very innovative technology. We work with inflatable heat shields. As probably most of you will know, like the first technology and the most, let's say, most established and reliable technology that is out there right now is ablative heat shields. It's, for example, been flown on the Apollo capsule already back in the 60s, and it's still being used by some capsules today. Then we have technologies like the Space Shuttle and Starship technology using ceramic tiles. And then the latest state of the art is really inflatable heat shields. So NASA has successfully flown the Lofted mission 2.5 years ago. And in Europe, we are the first commercial company to work with this type of heat shield. And the interesting thing, I think, for this community here is that it's a very, very scalable technology, right? So with Phoenix, we can bring 100 kilograms back. The next generation Phoenix 3 vehicle that we intend to fly in roughly 3 years from now is going to have around 1 ton of capacity. And the physical limit to scaling up these types of heat shields is at roughly 25 metric tons. Right. So if, for example, we have a breakthrough in the production of semiconductors, or the breakthrough in the production of glass fiber or quantum materials, and we really need to scale that up to industrial scales, that's exactly what ATMOS was founded for. So we are a cargo transportation company. We do not focus on, let's say, space stations and astronauts. We are really very much focused on cargo. Yeah, with that, thank you for giving me the opportunity here to be on this panel, and I'll be happy to answer all of your questions.
Thank you, Sebastian. So from free flyers, let's move to new stations. So Joost van Tooren, can you tell us more about yourself and ALATYR, please?
Sure. So thank you for having me on this panel. And so, yeah, my name is Joost van Tooren. I'm the commercial director at ALATYR. And before joining ALATYR, I was almost 20 years also in the aerospace business. First 10 years in aeronautics, and then I corrected my error and I went to space about 10 years ago, where I was, as the rest here, mainly in the transportation business at Ariane Group, and also on re-entry programs before joining ALATYR last September, where indeed I followed the conviction of the company and the 2 co-founders at ALATYR. That's what is missing on top of the re-entry vehicles is robotic space stations. And so ALATYR has been founded by our CEO, Aymeric Lhomme, and our CTO, Mathieu. And what we really are developing today is robotic stations, which will complement these re-entry vehicles by providing a robotic infrastructure in space, and thereby enabling, I would say, compact designs, interoperability with multiple types of vehicles, in orbit servicing vehicles, re-entry vehicles, and by making it more compact, also reducing the cost of operating such an infrastructure by an order of magnitude. And why do we really believe in this, I would say, overall architecture of vehicles and stations? Is because it really enables scalability. It was mentioned before, scalability is absolutely key, especially if we are targeting commercial applications. And therefore, we foresee a future where you have things that remain in orbit inside stations, which are then resupplied by transportation vehicles with the consumables and the production and what is manufactured in space, and thereby limiting, I would say, the majority of the cost of operating a space infrastructure is the transportation. So that's why we are focusing on having the two elements complementing each other and enabling really an acceleration of what we can do in space. So I would say that's the long-term vision. What we are concretely doing today at ALATYR is to develop a first small robotic station that is already having all the key characteristics of what we foresee later on larger stations. So pressurized volumes, significant power and thermal capabilities, because you can benefit of an optimized station design, and really to create this constant and repeatable environment that enables to do true industrial production in space. That is really operating continuously, iterating. Right after finishing a batch, you start the next batch. Right after finishing an experiment, you assess the results, and you initially reinitiate and iterate, becoming really compatible with, I would say, how research is done here on Earth. And so yeah, the stations, they should be able to then host laboratories, equipment that require significant power and thermal capabilities, and want to benefit of this, I would say, stability of a controlled environment around it.
Thank you, Joost. So now Mathieu Goudot to tell us more about Space Cargo Unlimited.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mathieu Goudot. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer and Commercial Director of Space Cargo Unlimited. I joined last year. Before that, all my career was in tech, in the dirty world of tech, where we were using the internet to sell burgers to people. Had a lot of fun, but always was passionate about space. Participated in a lot of conferences, was on the board of Space Founders, the CNES Accelerator. Loved it and joined Space Cargo Unlimited last year. And it's been quite a ride. As Francesco and Sebastian have pointed out, we've been in the business of experimenting ourselves with microgravity research and in orbit manufacturing in the world of agriculture for the last 10 years, mostly as our own projects. But as of a year and a half ago, we decided to focus all this knowledge that we had into creating a payload infrastructure that allows us to manage several payloads at the same time for in-space manufacturing, because it's very hard to build a vehicle and all the systems that go with it. Sebastian, or basically everyone here knows that, but it's even harder to try to create a platform for well, I don't know, harder. It's another job altogether to create a platform for a lot of different use cases to be able to be plugged in and work. I've talked to quite a few of you that are in the audience along the way of conferences, and the needs and requirements of each and every one of you are very different from one project to the next in terms of duration of time, the exposure to vacuum, power consumption, vibration resistance. All of those, once we get into the details, become quite a headache to manage. And we realize that having a system that allows at least to standardize those interfaces and requirements and create a service really to help everyone get to space and get their experiment back, while we piggyback on the infrastructure of ATMOS today, because they're, we believe, the best. Sorry for the other guys. So really the best for what we are trying to do and the scale of what we're trying to do, to become a bit of a workhorse of in-space manufacturing and microgravity research and development for the industry. Well, I know presentations are being long, so I'll let my profile shine during the questions.
Thank you very much, Mathieu. Now let's hear from Victor Maier for the exploration company.
Thank you, Francesco. Hello, everyone. Thanks for the invitation. Happy to be here. So my name is Victor, and I'm leading the governmental business for Germany and Central Europe at the exploration company. And I joined 3.5 years ago. and was 12.5 years working at Airbus Defence and Space. I'm actually not a commercial guy. I'm actually an engineer and served in several engineering roles at Airbus in Munich, but also in France. And this is also where I met Hélène Huby, who was our founder and the CEO of the exploration company. She led the European Service Module program at Airbus in Bremen, and then decided and actually saw that Europe is positioning itself into or guiding itself into a very depending position with the US, and then came up with the idea to build an own resupply spacecraft that is actually serving the International Space Station and other stations that are coming up. And so she created the company, which is more or less actually 4 years ago. So we're about to turn 4 years old end of this month. And yeah, we're designing, manufacturing, operating a reusable spacecraft. We call it NIX, and it's mainly meant to resupply the space stations around Earth and also the moon, providing cargo in orbit demonstrations, microgravity experiments to these destinations. Overall, 4 tons of payloads that we can bring up to the LEO and 3 tons that we can then bring down. And we charge this at 25,000 euro per kilogram, including the launch cost. And we're currently a bit more than 300 people across Germany, France, Italy, and the US. And we just opened recently in Luxembourg, where we are building a resupply, actually a refueling kit for our moon mission. And we're going to open in Dubai this year, where we're focusing on the lunar landing activities. And so far, we have signed 800 million euros of commercial contracts. 25% are institutional customers, so the European Space Agency or the German Space Agency that's flying experiments with us, or that bought actually a service to resupply the space station. And then 75% are commercial customers like VAST, Axiom, Starlab. These are like really the space stations, the CLDs, as they're called, the commercial stations that already booked 5 resupply missions with our vehicle. So far up till date, we have raised 225 million euros in terms of private capital that allows us to move in that speed and to get the thing started. We have been selected by the European Space Agency to provide a resupply service to the ISS and are on track with the development. We want to fly this in August 2028. And so far, we have passed the first safety review with NASA just very recently for the docking certification. And we launched 2 demonstration missions so far, a ballistic re-entry vehicle on Ariane 6, which is still orbiting, unfortunately, because it didn't make it on its way back. And a second mission that we just launched last month with SpaceX on a Falcon 9 rocket. It was including 300 kilograms of customer payloads. And here we managed to go through the plasma phase and through the re-entry, but didn't make it for the splashdown. So still lessons learned on this mission. And yeah, on these missions, we have spent overall 35 million euros in terms of development, and we're able to build 1 capsule in 9 months and the second one within 2 years. And so these are like the achievements that we have been able to achieve so far. And right now we're receiving actually the equipment for the new vehicle that we're going to build starting in September. And then we're going to perform a structure thermal test end of this year. And we will start the integration of NIX Earth for the ISS in July next year. So it's quite exciting times and quite in a scale-up mode right now.
Thank you, Victor. Quite exciting times indeed. Let's hear now from Neil Monteiro for Space Forge.
Hello. Okay, so Space Forge, for those that don't know, is with obviously quite similar to a lot of the other companies that are here, in that we are focused on microgravity manufacturing and return from space. The biggest differentiator, I suppose, for us is that we're focused very much on the semiconductor end of things. So producing materials in space that then go into the supply chain on Earth. That leads to quite a lot of unique kind of things within the company. So if you look at the vehicle that we're developing, which is the Forge Star, it is designed around being very high power, being happy handling a hot payload, and that kind of in itself then leads into other sort of impacts on the vehicle design that just wouldn't necessarily be the sort of thing you'd aim if you're, say, for example, doing pharmaceuticals. So I think that's very interesting, kind of the customer space, because we do also host other customers' payloads, as well as being our own customer. And it does mean that we can look at hosting things that might be better suitable for the platform that we're developing than it would be elsewhere. So I think that's one interesting side. And then, of course, we can't just do things in space. We have to do things on Earth as well. So the company is also outfitting a terrestrial capability for materials growth, which in and of itself makes us kind of unusual. There aren't that many companies around doing it. And we're just opening up a facility in just west of where our base is, so also in Wales in the UK, that's focused purely on terrestrial materials growth. So those two things have to sort of marry up. For myself, I work as microgravity research manager, which to me always sounds like a very over-the-top title. It just means that I work with our sort of customer-facing part of the company, so looking at third-party companies to come in and put payloads on board a Forge Star. Oh, and as many of the people here have done, we've had a space mission quite recently. We were on Transporter 14 along with Victor, obviously it's quite an exciting time to be able to see you actually put them in space.
Thank you, Neil, and thank you all for this introduction. So we've seen a lot more interest from quite a few different market segments in life science, in agriculture, food production. I would like to sort of poke you now more on the specific market that is the theme of the BSGN Accelerator call, which is currently open. So I really would like to hear from each one of you your sort of pitch to potential applicants or potential customers that are approaching this market. They could be companies that already have capabilities, so they're looking at this space. What's your offer? What microgravity can provide for this type of customers in advanced material and in space manufacturing? And also mention what is the next slot that will be available to ground also with the timeline. Let's start in sort of reverse order. I would like to start with Neil first this time.
Okay, Francesco, you're going to stop me if I go on too long, please. So I think it's worth maybe thinking about this from two different angles, because as I mentioned very briefly, Space Forge is on both sides of this, that we are developing a platform, but we're also our own customer. So obviously, if you look at this from a platform's point of view, and we were going to a materials growth company and saying, come and grow materials in our facility that we've made, then we would be touting the same kind of stories that you'd have heard around already today. So talking about crystal growth in microgravity, the evidence is there that you get these improvements. Obviously, there's also learnings to do on that. So things that might be useful purely from a research point of view, as well as from an industrial point of view. But I think it's probably also worth bearing in mind that as somebody selling materials, we're going into an incredibly mature industry in that case. So this is Space Forge as our own customer, and bear in mind I'm a space engineer, not a semiconductor physicist. The experience that I've seen on that side is that you tell an incredibly different story. So most of the customers on the semiconductor side don't care that something is made in space. If anything, that would probably put them off, because what they want to see is a very mature product that is going to be exactly as you specify it will be in the timescale that you specify it in. So the way that we would tell that story to a semiconductor company is very different, much more based around data. So I think it's worth bearing that in mind, that the microgravity story is not actually an attractive one when you're going into an industry that is based on very, very tight technical margins.
Understood. I mean, it's clear it's a mature industry and the requirements are high. So let's move to Victor. What is sorry, before we move to Victor, what's the next slot available with Space Forge?
If you want to host a payload with us? Yes. We haven't given a timeline on that, but it's going to be a couple of years.
Thank you. So Victor, what is instead the space exploration offering for this particular market segment?
It's actually a huge question. So it's really difficult to put this into a few minutes because it's actually new areas that we are exploring here all together, right? That's why it's such an exciting journey as well, especially when I joined as an engineer and trying to, pitch this to companies. You have to distinguish space and non-space industries, right? They also understand differently how to approach them, right? And how to find the right language, because we all speak in our acronyms that everyone knows. So we really have to adapt towards the customers. Just the language is super, super important. And I will share here maybe a little bit the kind of approach we did and the lessons learned. So we started, of course, with our homework, doing the homework and checking the ISS database, which is publicly available on the NASA website. website and really going like a deep research on what were the kind of topics that have been explored so far on the different segments, right? On material science, liquids, biotech, animals, whatsoever. So we really checked everything, who were the people, principal investigators, and really learned a lot out of this. And then we actually took it, I think, very unlikely for a space company, more like a software as a service company. And we really did like cold calls, like something which I think is not something usual in the space industry, and like reached out to people through emails, LinkedIn, looked like, Googling, detective work, trying to find contacts who are decision makers, who are like the champions in the company from the different segments. We divided this actually internally in the company as we said, space demo, space lab, and space emotions. So space demo is usually all the kind of space companies, space agencies. They know exactly what we speak about. Space lab is really more like universities, researchers, could be also pharma, biotech, agri-tech industry, so also in the non-space industry or cosmetics. And then space emotions were also like everyone, right? Could be kids, could be pupils, could be you, me, sending something for something personal, right? That we want to put up there. We created within 2.5 years more than 6,000 leads. So it was really like a crazy work that we put there in place, and signed 300 million euros of letters of intent for IOD missions or microgravity experiments. So really met the people, reached out to the people. Some people, most of the people, of course, said, we don't give a shit. We don't care about what you're doing and what you're selling, which is totally fine, right? We just needed to understand better the market. And we created also a lot of partnerships and serious partnerships with implementation partners. For example, Yuri, Space Application Services, so Ice Cubes, Redwire Space, Rhodium, Kaiser Italia, SSC, Space Pharma, Space Tango, Voyager Space, you name them, because we need their expertise. They were actually doing all the science for this principal investigators on the ISS, and we needed to bring them in these meetings with, for example, cosmetics companies or a luxury company that can actually help them to understand what can be done, because we are not the expert in this. We can put the place, power, we can bring them up and down. This is our business, but we are not the experts, and really like consulting what can be then really achieved. And for example, on Mission Possible, the mission we launched last month, we had proteins, for example, on board. This was actually coming through the BSGN program, through the other stream. But we also had like Europe's biggest cosmetics brand. We had 50 hair samples on board of this mission. They were testing a new formulation for a shampoo, making use of the crystal growth for increasing actually the volume of your hair. So this is what they tried to understand. And it was for them like really to understand if space has an added value. So we really had this first meeting with them, tried to understand, is this something of interest for them? In the beginning, we understood it's not something of interest for them, because we thought marketing would be more the use case for non-space companies, but we learned very quickly it's not at all a use case. So they really want to do product development, which is perfect. And then we brought in the implementation partners and really had like an in-depth discussion also with the researchers from these non-space companies. And the process is straight ahead and with this implementation partners. And once they decide they want to go, then we actually align, okay, what could be the size of the experiment, that we roughly understand the costs, because for us, it's then quite easy to calculate, just in terms of the dimension. We can then do a rough estimation of the cost. And then if it's like a 10-kilo thing, it's 250,000 euro. And then they know, okay, if it's worth for them or not. And I think this also makes a big difference, because we were able very transparently to communicate the price and like a time when we fly. And this is, I think, how we were so successful selling this first missions. We signed a contract, the implementation partner works and starts to work with the customer, and then they match the timeline on putting the payload on our vehicle. So this is then the way we move on. And there's even much more to say, but it's like very briefly to summarize like this kind of approach, how we pitch it. And we really do like individually, right? It's not some kind of standard automatic email that we send out. So we really try to really match like what could be the interest, like for cancer research, Alzheimer, diabetes, for crystal growth and growing proteins. And we didn't really go, we also went to trade shows and this like conventions, but then we were at the biotech convention, and people asked me like from a big pharma company, like, what the fuck are you doing here? Like, they were really like, they didn't understand why, they should go to space. And that just showed us like this lack of awareness. Like we still have to do more of these kind of sessions. And we're very thankful that you're doing this and hosting this, because there's just such a lack of awareness on the benefits of microgravity for this different areas. And Yeah, so the next mission will be August 28, which is unfortunately already completely sold. This will be the mission to the ISS. Then we have all the resupply missions for the commercial space station. So we actually slowed down our commercial activities right now because the next possible mission is unfortunately only in 2033, where people can buy themselves a mission. The rest is already booked. So if you plan something for 2033, always feel free to reach out. But I can also understand that it's for you then probably quite late. And then back to you, Francesco.
Okay, now there is a bit of time then to mature the idea up to that time. Thank you, Victor, for sharing also a little bit about your company approach to this market. Mathieu, what's instead the offering from Space Cargo Unlimited for this particular kind of customers and market?
Very similar to what you've heard both from Neil and from Victor, with the added element that we are really trying to go very broad as well in terms of markets. But what Victor explained is, and I'm not going to lie, pretty much the same approach that we're having. We did the same exercise, so it's quite funny, of going through the ISS manifest and contacting as many leads as possible, trying to explain to them the benefits of microgravity or understanding their needs. And we're a smaller company than they are. We only raised 20 million plus, so it's at an earlier stage. But we have our first flight coming up next year, mid next year with ATMOS. So and almost completely full. Still have a bit of room, and then after that, we see a real need for those customers to keep going on a repeat basis, and to create an opportunity to test and iterate and improve. So hence why we want to also have return capacity for some of our devices. So we're pretty much doing the same thing, trying to develop more flights for 2026, 2027, 2028, probably in the tune of, so that will depend on ATMOS's speed to market, but to the tune of 2 to 3 flights per year, starting 2027. And with 100 kilo of capacity, what we are aiming at is to be able to have around 5 to 7 different payloads for customers, maybe a little bit more if some of them are passive, but the idea is then to decrease the price and put the price at a price point where it makes it, and we can discuss price together as well, which I think is a good question to throw to the audience and to ourselves. Which price is acceptable for somebody per kilo, per volume, per power, per special service, per late access for biological experiments, in order to get to space and bring it back. And all our strength and what we do in terms of servicing is to try to fit people's payloads and requirements into the form factor that we offer. I mean, I'm sure, Victor, it was a headache to try to get all those payloads to fit inside Mission Possible and the form factor that you guys have. We do exactly that, and we try to really talk on a weekly basis with our customers to get us there, and at the same time not have them spend too much money on their hardware development. So that's why we provide telemetry, software, a little bit of temperature control and power distribution. Those are all things that we take care of, not the customer. And we try to offer as much as possible in a turnkey fashion. What Victor and both Neil, but also Victor, highlighted the levels of maturity of the different people and the where they want their payloads to be. Some of them are purely demonstration. I don't care so much about the results. I just want to make sure that it works in space and get my TRL increase. Others really care about the scientific results of what they get. Return of cargo and return of payload is not always a guarantee. So you need to provide different steps and milestones for them to still be satisfied with what you're offering to them. So that's why something like payload telemetry data and making sure that the result experiments or even photography is available is part of the added services that we try to provide to get us there. So yeah, in terms of capacity, so mid 2026, still a few kilos available and a few liters available. So if people want to contact me, we give good prices and good rates. And after that, for 2027, a lot of capacity available, late 26, early 27, lots of capacity available as well. So happy to always give good rates, especially discounts for early commitments.
Thank you very much, Mathieu, for telling us about your offering. Joost, instead, from ALATYR, there is a particular specific offering that is related to this market, to this segment. What do you propose?
Yeah, indeed. So indeed, what we offer obviously is a bit different, given that we remain in orbit. Of course, we are focusing on those customers which have a benefit on that. So because what we really want to do is take I would say, I don't like the word industrial look, but really also the long-term look of what is the business that you want to do, what is the type of production that you want to do, what's kind of research capability that you want to put in place that is commercially relevant, and that means really discussing with the customers on what is the equipment that you would need on board? What is the sequencing between the equipments? What kind of robotics can you benefit of? Because we have quite a number of robotics on board. What are the capabilities in terms of power, thermal, environment? What kind of versatility do you require? But then also, what kind of how much consumables are we talking about? The consumables that if you reuse the equipment in orbit all the time, as we are only replenishing the consumables, what materials, what fluids, what gases are we talking about, so that we can really think about a production chain, a research, just like on Earth, a lab operated at distance, and once what is produced, what analysis capabilities are required, and if the production needs to go back to Earth, how do we store that? And so, for instance, on the biotech side, we're talking about biobanks, right, where you store cell lines before the experiment and after the experiment, where you can, which allow you to launch new experiments with other cell lines using the same equipments that between experiments have been sanitized, etc. So it's really about the whole production chain and research chain that we are discussing with customers. We're not only discussing with customers, but just like Space Forge, we are also our own customer. In that case, not for semiconductors, but on the biotech side, because we are also convinced, and I think Space Forge also has the right approach there, you need to open the market yourself. You cannot just wait and hope that the others will understand what space can bring. You need to be very active also yourself. And there's so many applications that you're not actually in competition with your customers at all. You're opening the customer of the market together with their customers and showing the added value. So that's really I would say the approach we take when we are talking to people. And then of course, what does it concretely mean today? Because typically these are the things that are more long term. And how do we get there? Do we need to start doing IRD-IOV on board? Does the IRD-IOV need to be internal to the station? Can it be external to the station? And what would be opportunities? Now, from a timing point of view, we are targeting the commercial operation already starting in 2029, so perfectly in line with, I would say, the post-ISS transition phase. And already before that, obviously on our side, we're already testing a lot of things beforehand. But I would say for hosted payloads, especially, which all our stations will have a part which is, I would say, the laboratory, the automated laboratory that stays inside always. And then there's slots available for hosted payloads for third parties to already start initiating testing and doing their experiments before we then start launching additional stations, which become then really factories in space for their application.
No, thank you very much, Joost. So time is a little bit against us, but Sebastian, we'd like to hear from you, the perspective of ATMOS for this market, and then we go for a very quick wrap-up of the session.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, so from ATMOS perspective, the number one thing that we really want to improve for the customers is cost per kilogram, right? And that's a very difficult thing to do in the space industry. And so you really need to look at all of the details to make that happen. So I can tell you a couple of examples of how we are working on that concretely. Number one is on the tech side. We use inflatable heat shields because they have a very good mass ratio. What that allows you to do is that you bring more payload up and you pay less for the launch, so you save on the launch cost. Number two is what inflatable heat shields also enable you to do is to bring back the whole spacecraft, right? Like as of today, most re-entry vehicles that are out there, they have to discard of some sort of a service module that contains, for example, solar panels, tanks, and so on. And with inflatables, you can pretty much bring back the whole spacecraft. And that increases your level of reusability. Then the next thing that you always have in your cost calculations is the operations cost. So how do you bring that down? Well, pretty much with cadence, right? So if you wait for years to launch, you have a lot of operations costs that you have to factor into your calculations. If you launch more on a, let's say, quarterly or even monthly basis, then that cadence brings down your operations cost. And in the end, it's also about simplicity, because if you build a vehicle that is very difficult to develop, I mean, let's look at the example of, for example, the Space Rider, right? Like it's a super, super highly evolved vehicle, pretty much like a mini space shuttle. It can do almost anything, but it's been 15 years in development, right? So if you keep it simple, you can move faster, but then you can also not offer everything. So you have to make a conscious decision what you want, and ours is simplicity and low cost per kilogram. And then in the end, one thing that also helps you to bring down the cost is economies of scale. And so what we do at ATMOS is we try to develop one technology that you can use for different use cases, not just for the in-space manufacturing and R&D, but also, for example, to return and reuse rocket upper stages. So we work, for example, on what's called the Icarus project. That's a European Commission funded project to return rocket upper stages. And we also work on defense applications, right? Like literally putting military goods into space and returning them from space. And those different applications enable us to work with economies of scale to launch really a lot of vehicles. And I think Mathieu has pointed out already a lot of opportunities that we have there. So if Mathieu says that he's happy to take additional customers for the flight next year in summer, we'll be very happy to support that. So yeah, let's make it happen.
Fantastic. No, thank you very much, Sebastian. So I would like to thank you all for sharing your stories, telling us a little bit more about your offering, your timeline. I really feel that it's worth for me to praise all of you, because this new breed of companies that is emerging in this market, I think, is not only bringing the innovation of new offering of new capabilities, but it's also bringing something that I feel is often overlooked. I mean, all of you share a story about going out there, learning about the terrestrial market, being with the customers, which is something that often in the space industry does not happen. I think is required absolutely to happen in this particular segment. And I think companies like yours are showing that there is more effort, there is a learning curve to go through to do this, but I'm pretty sure that this will also mean that the market will grow, and new markets are possible to be attracted to space and to microgravity. So with this final note, unfortunately, time is strict, and I need to thank you all once again and leave to the next session.